welcome to the bonus content of Workforce, a podcast that I host that looks at behavioural science and practical insights in a way that brings you better insights into what's happening in your own workplace. In this particular segment, I am talking to Christian Hunt, and I am asking him, why do people stay in jobs despite being bullied? Why don't they see that there's plenty more jobs in the sea? Let's see what Christian has to say.
But do you think recognizing it is enough? So I know a few people now who work for companies that have good brands. So maybe that, you could argue that's part of the reason that they stay. And they know actually that they're being treated quite badly. They know that they're being dumped on. They know in one particular case, the person is actually outrightly getting bullied by individuals who are quite senior in the hierarchy. So they know it's happening, but they're still staying. So I guess if you could help me understand the psychology behind that, it would be helpful. But the second part is it rational to kind of weigh up costs and benefits in that regard, where you say, actually, I'm working for this kind of major company that people actually recognize the brand, inside the walls, things mightn't be as good as what I would like it to be. But the benefit of having that is giving me something that I can't get elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the challenge is if we have joined an organization, we have, in theory at least, done some analysis on it, right? We've made a decision to join that organization. And so in many respects, we're having to unwind a decision we've previously taken. And if we're then sitting there and thinking, well, actually, better the devil I've invested a lot of time in this. So sunk cost fallacy keeps us hanging on there, and we can easily convince ourselves that things will get better. And we see this in relationships where people stick around with someone they really shouldn't. There's abusive relationships, but there's even just relationships that are just not great, not fulfilling, that people hang around in for marriages, that people hang around in for long periods of time. So we shouldn't necessarily be surprised. I don't think this is not a unique dynamic to the job market, but I think it probably is more significant. And it's one of the things that holds us back is public embarrassment. I'm not sure LinkedIn is necessarily, and social media is necessarily helpful. If we're gaining, some of the tricks that organizations use is the respectability of working there, the future imagine the future potential that you have with this brand name on your CV, but you should stick around for a bit longer. We'll promise you some jam tomorrow in terms of job titles and everything else. And so I think it's entirely understandable that people struggle with that exit piece, because you think, well, I'm going from all these amazing things into I don't know what. And of course, if the pull of the other thing starts to get greater, then some of these things can unwind themselves. But you can convince yourself very easily that there isn't an alternative. I'm really lucky to be here, and all those sorts of things. And so I think brand, your point is spot on. Brand is an absolutely key part of that. If this is a well-respected company, and you can imagine those conversations. Well, why did you leave there? And I used to have this all the time. Every time I changed jobs, my parents would sort of say to me, oh, that's a brave decision. And what was fascinating was I would then say to them, well, hold on a minute. The people I'm now leaving that you're concerned about me leaving were the very people you were concerned about me joining. This dynamic repeats itself. Yeah. And so I think it's an entirely understandable thing. And so what can we do to start thinking about it? Well, we have to start recognizing the attractiveness of alternative options. And so also, just as we say, look, there isn't just one person from relationship for you, that there will be lots of potential partners out there. There's plenty more fish in the sea, as the logic goes. And I think one of the exciting things that we're starting to see are other careers becoming more visible. And so we can start to see the value of other career paths as people share that. So that's where social media, things like LinkedIn are helpful, because you can see how other people are reacting it. So I think it's a case of we have to look at what other alternatives are and be open to those, and try and recognize when we are having a blinkered view on our current existence and how other things might give us different things. And not to be scared. Fear is the biggest driver here. Fear of if I walk away from this, life is going to be awful. But we all instinctively know that sometimes we have to take a leap and go and look at something different. And one of the things I'd say to people is it needn't be a massive leap. You can prep for it before. You can take advantage of it. The moment you decide you're going to leave an institution, all sorts of opportunities present themselves within that institution for you to further yourself in ways that if you were sticking around, you might not do. But if you look and focus and say, what opportunities does it here? I don't have to jump now. I can make a plan to jump. And then when I does come to jump, it'll be much easier for me.
There's so much to unpack there. So I think the first thing that you said that really resonated with me was time. So I think, people can convince themselves they don't have enough time to change. And I absolutely accept that. I think something that in what you said reminded me of when there were the big layoffs in tech companies. Twitter is a really good example of this. And people were treated incredibly badly, both before the layoffs and then after when the layoff happened, they were basically kind of just left to go and fend for themselves. And what was really interesting was on LinkedIn, there was this culture of people still writing really nice things about the company, which really reminds me of the original Stockholm Syndrome, where the people who have been the captive actually pay for the defense of the person who held them captive. And I wonder, firstly, about the motivation behind that. But secondly, you mentioned, LinkedIn and stuff. We all kind of buy into this game where you need to sound really well on LinkedIn. But I find that people who are more vulnerable and who actually tell it like it is on social media platforms, and I know this even through my own posts, rarely do I do it, but if I ever kind of say something that's a little bit kind of out of the evidence field, people tend to like it more actually than when you're towing the game. So it's interesting that as humans, we play this game where we present a perfect front when actually what people like is the vulnerability bit, I think.
Yeah, so I think the distinction, the Stockholm Syndrome, when it comes to people who've genuinely been held hostage versus company, I think there's a slight difference there, which is if you've made a hostage situation,
it's probably not illegal.
Well, but you haven't chosen that particular outcome, right? And so you're making the best of a situation, whereas employment, we have chosen to go and work there. So I can see why you would want to stick there and say this is a great company, because you're going to have to lever the fact that you've worked there in a future thing. And I think there's also a fear of, if I say something at all negative about my current employment, then future employers are going to look at this and think this person isn't very loyal. And so I can see a completely rational explanation for why you would not speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about your current employment, even if you were hating it. It feels like towing the party line does have a particular benefit.